Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Matthew Dickerson. Tech Talk. Sit back and relax. It's time to talk technology.
Greetings, fellow futurists. It's time to set aside your virtual crystal balls and digital tarot cards. Pull up a chair and get comfy because you've got about 45 minutes to soak in all the news of the future. Welcome to Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. And here he is, all rolled out, dusted off and polished up, nice and shiny for yet another week. It's our Tech Talking guru. It's Matthew Dickerson. What's been on your mind this week?
Well, unfortunately, scams have been on my mind, but not so much my mind. They've been on the mind of one of my clients. And I just want to talk through some of the steps that this scammer took with this client's email because I thought it was quite interesting, the process that was undertaken. So first thing that happened, there was a security breach of some description, but the client rang and said, I can't get my email, my password has changed. So can you reset my password? No problem, that's quite easy. Reset your password, there you go, problem solved, happy days. Ring a couple of hours later, I can't get back in again. My password, okay, let's have a look at this. This is maybe a bit more serious. Let's change it to something a bit more difficult, change the password and away we go. So change the password, everything's fine. A couple of hours later, ring back, that's great. I can send emails, I can get into my emails, but there's none in there. I've got no one in there. I said, does anyone like you anymore? Is that part of it? No, people are emailing me.
They can come in and invade my email inbox and clean it up for me.
Right. So I said, well, let's have a look. And I had a look, and it took a little bit of investigative work to find out exactly what was going on. But what had happened is the scammer had taken over the inbox. After that, they then used their inbox to spam people. And so I found in deleted items, after they'd been sent and then deleted, they've sent a bunch of emails that were saying, please sign this, here's important information, the sort of normal scam emails you'd expect to see. But they were then deleted out of the sent item, so they couldn't be seen. But incoming emails coming because some of them were bouncing back. And so the scammer didn't want to alert the person to the fact that, hold on, these emails are bouncing back. So they'd created a rule and every email that came in just got shuffled off. And I don't know why they didn't just delete them, but they got shuffled off into another folder so that they weren't seen there in the inbox. So all the emails this person had received, as well as thousands upon thousands of bounce backs, were all sitting there, but she couldn't see them because they weren't in her inbox, the automatic rule that had been set. And I thought it's a fair few steps for the scammer to go through to actually set it all up and to try and hide the fact that these emails are bouncing back from the person.
So is there any value for the scammer other than nuisance value?
Well, absolutely, there is value for the scammer because what they were doing was sending out a bunch of emails to say, please click on this link to confirm, blah, 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 and then that's when they're getting people's information. So essentially, if someone responded to that, they didn't want the person who actually owned the mailbox to see, hold on, why is Billy Blog sending me an email about my payment that I just sent him? I didn't send anything like that. So those emails were automatically going to another folder, so they were never seen. And then obviously they just needed a mailbox to send out. My first reaction when they said they weren't getting any emails, I went, you've obviously been blacklisted. Let's go and do some search on some common blacklists and see if your domain name is there so we can get it taken off those blacklists. But I went and did some investigative work on blacklists and the domain name didn't show up any of those. So that's what I think what's happened there. So creating the rule, I haven't seen that before, when you create a rule to automatically take those bounce backs, or all emails basically that came in were just shuffled off to another folder.
Yeah, wow.
So it's a step after step after step.
Goodness me.
All of that was to get access to that mailbox to be able to send out thousands, tens of thousands of emails to then try and trick someone out there into actually doing something about it.
Yeah, right. Wow. Scammers.
It's a lot of money.
Why don't they
around,
get
isn't
another
it?
hobby?
That's right.
All right, well, as I look down at the agenda for today, we're looking at cleaner travel through the skies with a big collaboration that's going on right here in sunny Australia. We'll have a look at how you can keep your Mars rover puncture-free, and smug-faced EV drivers just got a little smugger with some new stats on battery life that'll outstrip conventional engines. More of that later. Let's get cracking with a farewell to an old friend. It's official. CDs and DVDs are the signature tools of boomers and boomers alone. But now, as Sony bid farewell to their production of blank Blu-ray discs, anyone insisting on using any physical media as their go-to format needs to start stockpiling now. and you can put your blank Blu-rays on the shelf right next to your floppy disks and the dot matrix printer paper. Matt, forget the end of a chapter. This is closing the book on physical media, surely.
And I remember Blu-ray. I remember when it first came out. It was about 2006.
Wow.
And the next year, sometime around 2007, I remember buying a Blu-ray player, and so I picked it up, and then I went and rented a Blu-ray video from the video store and brought it home, ready to plug it in. And I said to the kids, right, have a look at this. You know, you thought you had good quality TV or movies before. This is going to blow your mind. This is going to be fantastic. So I put the movie in and said play, and we sat back there and went, looks pretty much the same as it did with the DVD.
Yeah.
And I suspect the TV itself probably was the limiting factor, not so much the quality of what was on the DVD or the Blu-ray, sorry. So the advantage of Blu-ray, and it was actually a collaboration. So back in 98, there was Sony and some other industry players who said, we need to do something better than DVD. The concept of DVD, which obviously was a better version of a CD, the concept of DVD was pretty impressive, but let's do something better. So they worked away for about 8 years with an industry-wide concept of Blu-ray. And the main difference with Blu-ray was that it used a different wavelength. So they used a blue-violet laser, so that had a wavelength of 405 nanometers. A normal DVD had a red laser with a wavelength of 650 nanometers.
So with a smaller wavelength, I guess you can read finer signals.
Correct, that's exactly right. So you get that shorter wavelength, you get better precision, so you can put more data on the disc. And to give you an idea of how much more data, a standard DVD, 4.7 gigs, a single layer Blu-ray disc, 25 gigs, a dual layer, double that, 50 gigs of data on a disc. So a normal DVD would give you about 2 hours of a standard definition movie. Well, obviously, we want better than standard definition. We want high definition. So the Blu-ray could handle that on one disc. So fantastic. But again, they didn't seem to take off that much. Sure, you had some titles that came out, and I think when they launched, they had titles like The Terminator and 50 First Dates were kind of a couple of the ones that came out initially. A couple of years after the launch, they had about 3,500 titles on Blu-ray. But I remember going to the video store, and you'd see all your DVDs, and then there'd be a section over there with some Blu-rays, not a lot of Blu-rays. So,
but streaming was coming in as well, and people were downloading things off from the internet as well.
Oh, you've gone and thrown a spanner in the works, haven't you?
It was just like they've come out with this excellent technology, but it's just come out a little bit too late.
It did, and that was the problem. And they did some better compression. They had, so DVD used MPEG-2, but when you had Blu-ray, you had MPEG-4, you had VC1, even audio in uncompressed PCM audio. So you had all these things that were better quality. The actual surface of it was more resistant to scratches. They had a particular durable surface on there. So all these advantages, if that pesky little streaming hadn't have come along, then everyone would have gone, oh, Blu-ray, those DVDs, how do we survive with those DVDs? Blu-ray is the go. But it just came out just when streaming was just getting started.
A little bit too late.
That's right. And so it actually seems to me that it's a fairly short time frame. 2006, this brand new technology, better than anything you've ever seen, better than sliced bread. And here we are 19 years later, and Sony said, and Sony, remember, was one of the drivers of it.
Yeah.
PlayStation 3 came out with Blu-ray reading capabilities. So they came now 19 years later and said, actually, we're going to stop producing.
Finally admitting defeat.
Yeah, to a certain extent. Now, I'm sure you used to be able to buy blank recordable Blu-ray discs for a little while. I think Verbatim is still making them, for example. Panasonic is still making them. But when Sony, the main driver of Blu-ray, said, no, you know what, that's it, we've done. 19 years afterwards, we've done. Now, they also said they're going to stop the production of mini discs and MD data and mini DV cassettes. So a couple of other things there that are a bit of a blast from the past, a bit like floppy disks. So all these old mediums are going, and there's probably a case to have for some of those. You might need them for archiving. Then if you archive it, you've got to have some device that can read them. And imagine in 20 years' time saying, can I buy a Blu-ray player? Where can I get one of those? Can I get this one repaired? People would laugh at you.
Yeah.
But it's that whole progression that we continually get, isn't it? The latest and greatest today, 20 years later maybe. So we're talking about 5G technology now, and we've seen with 4G and 3G and 2G, probably 20 years is about the maximum lifespan you get of any of those new technologies when they come out. So Blu-ray, you're okay while you're lasting.
I think of people who might have put family videos and stuff on Blu-ray and DVD, and that's Me.
So you just have to keep a player somewhere.
Videos? Yeah, we've got a player that works, and we just try to keep it in mint condition.
So
when we want to watch it in another 20 years, we can.
what I did many years ago, I had a little project for one of the kids, actually all the kids during the school holidays, and that was to take our old cassettes, and I'm talking about little cassettes that went into a camera that had lots of great videos on them of the kids growing up, etc. And I went, how much longer am I going to be able to have some way of playing these? And they're a bit of a pain. Searching a tape is a bit of a drama.
Yeah.
So their job over the holidays was to transfer all those tapes to a computer, which they did.
Yep.
And so now when they want to go look for them, they're kind of indexed, vaguely indexed and labelled and all the rest of it. So they can go and search for it online. And the good ones they've uploaded to YouTube, so they've got somewhere else to store them. So storing things in the cloud is how we're going to do a lot of that. But
that's how we're going to do it.
One day you get internet outage, for example, and how do you view those? Or you get something happen drastic where the cloud disappears. Oh dear.
Please.
So Blu-ray, nice while you lasted. Sayonara.
Now, one source of personal pride for me has been my ability to reel off my credit card details just off the top of my head. It streamlines pizza purchases, it pays bills, it solves online shopping problems for my wife at a pinch. Sounds a bit permissive. I was angling for impressive though. Well, in a bid to increase security, Mastercard has set to pull its 16-digit identifier from physical cards. So, Matt, does that mean that there'll be no 16-digit number, or do my awesome skills suddenly become mandatory for everyone?
I actually think you'll still have the ability to rattle off your 16-digit number, and that's...
But I won't be able to refer to my card if I just need a checker.
Well, the interesting part is that it's more about behind the scenes. You'll have a physical card that it probably won't have a number on there. And when you go and use that, you tap that somewhere, for example, behind the scenes, your bank and Mastercard will create a token. Now, that token will be a very long, complicated token that you won't be able to remember because it'll be 100 digits or whatever made up of alphanumeric characters. And that token will be what's transmitted from the supermarket when you're doing your shopping to Mastercard and authorised with your bank, etc. But that token will be different when you go to the supermarket to when you do some online shopping, for example.
Yeah, right.
Or that token might be different when you're using your phone to make a purchase as opposed to when you're using just a computer and putting in some details there. So the whole idea of it is that it's very easy. Well, not very easy, but scammers can manage to do it. They look at that 16-digit number while it's being transmitted and they go, I've got James' a 16-digit number. I can now go and use that to do some other online purchases. Happy days. But when you finally go, hold on, these purchases here, you confirm with your wife she didn't make some purchases from this particular place, and then you say to the bank, please cancel my card, and then it's a hassle. You get a new card issued, and then all those recurring payments you had, you've got to go and set those up again and go through that process. So it's all a bit of a drama. If a token is compromised, and good luck compromising that token, but if a token's compromised, then Mastercard and your banking institution just say, okay, that token's now gone. But your card, the thing that is you, stays the same. But my first question when I was looking at the research of this, my first question was, well, how am I going to do an online purchase? Now, if I'm doing an online purchase on my phone, I figure that's pretty easy because I can probably just use, say, Apple Pay to actually pay for that on my phone without typing in a number.
Yeah.
But if I'm on a computer, on a PC, and I want to type in that number, how am I going to do that? Now, I suspect you still will have a 16-digit number you could type in, and then at the end of that process, behind the scenes, it'll convert that into a token. So the 16-digit number will never be transmitted off in some way where someone could intercept that and have a look at that.
But like our passwords, we're not supposed to write them down anywhere.
So your 16 digits, commit it to memory and then chew up the bit of paper
So I'm
and spit
okay
it
with
out.
that, but just one card. I've only got space for one card in my head.
That's right. Look, the problem we've got here is that Australia in particular has been particularly subject to fraud. Of all the fraud across the world from Mastercard, or not from Mastercard, using Mastercard, 25% happens in Australia.
Oh, wow.
Now, I started to wonder why. We do adopt technology quite quickly in Australia, so maybe we use technology more than a lot of other countries, so maybe that exposes us. Maybe we're doing more online shopping. I'm not sure why. Maybe the laws in this country aren't strong enough. Maybe we don't pursue the bad guys as hard. Maybe the FBI, for example, really pursues those bad guys, whatever country they're in. And maybe we just go, oh, well, they're in Nigeria, we can't get them. So 25%, that number, if you turn that into a number, $2.74 billion in 2023 with Mastercard scams. 601,000 scam reports filed. And most people, when we talk about how many people were scammed with other methods and we say this many reported, we don't know how many unreported, most people do report a bank scam, a Mastercard scam, because they want to try and get the money back on their Mastercard, but they also want to block their Mastercard so it doesn't keep happening. So I suspect there'd be a much higher rate of reporting. So 601,000 scam reports filed, but that was an increase over 2022 of 18.5%. Now, that's pretty scary when you get that sort of increase. So Mastercard saying, we've got to do something about this. By 2030 is when they say we'll have no numbers on any cards whatsoever, but already we've got AMP Bank, for example, who's starting the process where they'll be the first in Australia to issue numberless debit and credit cards, and they're starting that next month. So it's happening with some banks in the short term. Now, another thing that I found interesting is in one of my businesses, we give all our staff credit cards. So we say, here you go, here's a credit card, $500 limit, just use it for petty cash. I find petty cash so painful. If you need to go and buy a ream of paper or just buy some coffee for the lunchroom, whatever, just use the card. And if you want to use it fraudulently, then knock yourself out, go and whack $500 at a restaurant and have a big party, and then you won't have a job the next day. So I've never had a problem with fraud from because people sometimes go, what, you give your staff a credit card, but if you're going to lose your job for $500, then you probably aren't that a smarter staff member. So I've never had a problem with fraud. But what I do have a problem with is you get a staff member start, and if in particular they don't bank with the same bank that we bank with, it's a 100-point ID check. It's a bit of a drama, and it takes about 3 or 4 weeks to go through the process to get another corporate credit card issued. I'm actually now starting to use virtual credit cards. So we won't issue a credit card for a staff member in the old traditional sense. It'll be a virtual credit card they'll only be able to use from their phone or their watch, and I can issue it within hours rather than wait for all the other processes to go through. And if something happens, I've got the ability to say, stop that card, it's done. And that becomes useless as a digital card. So it just becomes something you use on your phone. So we're moving that way anyway. I still find though motels, the bane of my existence are motels. I go to check into a motel and they say, credit card. I go, yep, I've got my watch here. No, sir, we need to do the hold on it. And I go, well, surely we're in 2025 now. You can manage to do that with my digital versions. And then you sit there and have an argument, and then finally I pull the card out because I know it's going to be a problem. So you bring your card with you, or my wife says, stop being a pain and just use your card. So, but we need to get better ways to do this because electronic, virtual, non-physical credit cards are definitely going to be the way of the future. So we need everyone to catch up though. Hire cars are another one. I have a problem with hire cars. They like to do the same thing. Anyone that puts a hold on the card, they want to have the physical card to
Get
do
with
it.
the program, guys.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you.
The hydrogen power revolution is well and truly on its way, with news of development and investment partnerships now hitting the digital newsstands on a regular basis. We know that traditional EV tech developments in aviation are greatly limited by the laws of physics, though. So engineers are leaning heavily into hydrogen power as a way to get to green up that industry that currently churns out enormous volumes of CO2 in the atmosphere. Matt, what is the news in hydrogen-powered flight now?
Damn you, laws of physics. Can't somebody just change the laws of physics? Can't Trump do an executive order for some new laws of physics and fix some of these problems up?
Get him the folder.
That's right.
And the pen.
Get it sorted. We have talked a little bit about hydrogen-powered stuff, cars to a certain extent, but planes. And I think where we're going to see hydrogen used is really, well, in transport in general, is when you need to go further than electric practically can go. So if I'm a truck driver and my daily job is to bring products from Perth across to Sydney, then it's going to be a bit of a hassle doing that in an electric truck. So I probably want something else. Petrol will be gone at some stage, or diesel and petrol will be gone at some stage in the next maybe decade. So hydrogen will probably make sense for those long-haul trucks. Shipping, electric ships. I'm not sure how well they'll go on those big journeys, but hydrogen.
Well, we're talking about those sails, though.
Yeah.
Yep. Those anyway, that was in a previous episode. I digress.
Yeah, but again, some of those long haul things and planes. We've already talked before about short trips, 1 hour, 1.5 hour. Electric planes will probably be the way to go for that. the trips when you go from Sydney to LA, when you're up in the air for 13 hours, gee, that's a lot of batteries you got to carry.
Yeah.
So you're probably not going to do those with batteries, and we might still be doing those with good old jet fuel for some time. But even if we got rid of all the other shorter flights, that'd be good. But the mid-range flights, when you start to talk about flights that are maybe 3 hours, gee, you're really pushing the envelope there with electric. But maybe hydrogen can be a solution for that. And that's where you've got Stralis Aircraft, which is based in Brisbane, which I love the fact that it's an Australian company.
Yeah.
They're going fairly well with their content with commercial hydrogen-powered flights, and they're talking about that by maybe 2027, doing some regional flights in Australia. Those flights that are those sort of 2-3 hour flights, not the very short flights, but those longer flights, not going international long haul though. And they've got some prototypes being worked on. They've actually got propellers on the ground now as we speak being powered by hydrogen. That's great on the ground, but you've got to get it up in the air then. But to give you an idea of the interest out there, they've got $372 million in signed letters of intent from 10 airlines across the US, Europe, Asia, Australia and New Zealand. So there's some people saying, if you can get this right, here's my letter of intent, I'll buy X number of these aircraft off you. Yeah. Now, they haven't given them any money yet because they said, you get it right. If you don't get it right, we're giving you nothing. Yeah, that's right. But if you do get it right, I'm ready to hand over this serious money. And obviously that helps them in their funding processes. Now, they talk a lot about it, saying not only will they be better for the environment, which is driving a lot of this change, but they'll be cheaper flights because they believe you can produce hydrogen cheaper than jet fuel. You can get quieter flights, and they've already done that with their testing with their propeller on the ground, definitely quieter than burning fuel. And obviously you'll get reduced greenhouse gas emissions, which is obviously the main aim of all of this. So all of this is good. It does rely, of course, on green hydrogen. If you're using hydrogen, you want to make sure that where you're sourcing your hydrogen from has been produced with renewables. And that's happening more and more now. Maybe with some of the early experiments, hydrogen was being produced using dirty power, but there is an industry out there, and when there's an industry out there, people will fill that market. So there are companies out there focused on producing green hydrogen. And in fact, sometimes you'll see when people are building, or people, organisations are building large solar farms, large wind farms, one of their ideas, rather than putting excess power when you don't need the power into batteries, is to say, let's go and use that excess power to produce some green hydrogen. So when you've got too much power in the middle of the day and you've got solar panels, well, let's use that to produce hydrogen. We could use it for firming power, or we could use it for other hydrogen needs. So it's happening there. I think it'd be fantastic getting on a plane, 2027, not that far away, because I keep thinking it's a few years away, but we're in 2025.
Turned around and looked at the calendar and went, oh no, we're there? We're in the future already?
We're there, that's right, in the future.
So the news for EVs just gets better and better. Now, range anxiety, that's diminishing with design improvements and increasing the infrastructure out there for charging up. We know that spontaneous combustion is grossly exaggerated. It's a non-issue. We explained that in just a recent episode. Perhaps the last bastion for the EV tentative is longevity. Apparently, EVs don't last very long. Matt, something tells me that you're about to smash down another wall of misunderstanding.
Well, I went looking for a story about this in particular because I had a chat with some people at a car event recently, and they were saying, well, those EVs don't last very long. And I said, well, I reckon I'll get a few 100,000 Ks out of my EV with minimal maintenance compared to a car that gets a piston going up and down inside a cylinder, wearing out rings, getting potential rebores, wearing out bearings, a lot of moving parts in an engine. I remember the first Tesla I had a total of 43 moving parts. So with 43 moving parts, you get to the point where you go, well, actually, what's got to go wrong? Yeah. There are very few parts to go wrong in this particular vehicle. So that's all well and good for me to say it's logical and sensible, but it's great to have some data to back you up. So I went searching and I found some data out of the UK. And they found, this is out of the UK's roadworthiness test. So again, it doesn't apply to the world, but you can probably extrapolate and say it's probably pretty similar across the world. This analysis was done on 300 million records, 29.8 million vehicles. So a reasonable sample space.
That's a pretty good sample size.
That's right. And it was done over about a 17-year period. So you've got some data there that you can probably use. It's quite reasonable. Now, based on that, they're saying the average lifespan of a vehicle that's electric is approximately 18.4 years. Approximate lifespan of a petrol car is 18.7 years. Pretty similar.
Yeah.
Diesel vehicles, 16.8 years, which I found interesting because most people think that diesel is going to last longer. For whatever reason, maybe that's a myth as well, but based on that, maybe diesel cars are doing harder work, I'm not sure, but fewer years.
But I'm thinking, okay, so you've drawn this data's been drawn from 17 years. How far has battery technology come along in 17 years?
That's exactly right. So an electric vehicle 17 years ago.
So that includes averages that included some data from old batteries that weren't as good.
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
And I think you're right, those older EV models were less reliable. Then you look at the actual mileage comparison. When they looked at the EVs, they found the average lifespan of the vehicles before basically retirement was 200,000 kilometres for an electric vehicle compared to 187,000 kilometres for a petrol vehicle. So that's, again, you've got a lot of those moving parts, a lot of parts to wear out in a petrol vehicle. One of the things, though, that starts to really push it over the edge is when they then looked at the maintenance costs, the average maintenance costs. And an EV, and again, based out of this work in the UK, an EV had 3.7 cents per kilometre as the average maintenance cost compared to internal combustion vehicles, combined diesel and petrol, 6.2 cents per kilometre. So not quite double the price to run an internal combustion engine vehicle compared to an EV.
And when you're saying maintenance, we're talking about a change of tyres after 30 or 40,000 Ks.
We're talking about everything, all the maintenance that might need to be done, because in a petrol vehicle, you are changing the oil. That's a maintenance cost. Yeah. You are possibly doing some work. You might need to change valves or change rings or change various bearings in the motor.
Brake pads and things.
Yeah, and you've also got then, and that's a good point, brake pads, sure, there's still wear in brake pads on an EV, but we know that you're using Lanza's law to slow the car down to the point when...
The regenerative braking.
Yeah, you're not needing the brake pads to do all the slowing down. So you do use brake pads, but less. So you might go 50,000 kilometres in a petrol vehicle before you replace brake pads. You might go 100,000 before you replace brake pads in an EV. So there's those type of things. The only thing I'd say is probably you might use tyres a bit quicker in an EV because they accelerate so quickly, but that would be a very minor thing.
But if you're a moderate accelerator... You're going to be fine. You'll get the normal wear out of you.
That's right. Yeah. But what's the point of being a moderate accelerator in an EV? No, I'm not saying that. Drive sensibly, people. But all of these things there just go to that point where people say the EVs are too dear, the upfront cost, and typically they are a bit dearer than the equivalent petrol vehicle. But I know in studies that I've seen, when you take into account the maintenance costs, then you look at the total cost of ownership, the TCO of your EV is definitely cheaper than the TCO of an internal combustion engine vehicle. Because don't forget, that's just maintenance costs I've quoted there. Fuel costs, when you compare your petrol costs compared to your electricity costs, again, electricity costs are dramatically lower than your fuel costs in petrol. So it just adds up to lots of savings, and the longevity is there definitely.
Oh, yeah, but we're also seeing a lot more, BYDs and MGs out there, and they're a little bit, they're the cheaper models on the market, but they're doing a great job.
Well, and they are bringing the price down everywhere. Again, that's exactly right. So you are seeing cheaper models. So it's no longer now saying, oh, no, I could buy a petrol vehicle for $30,000, but the equivalent EV is $70,000. It might be now $30,000 compared to $40,000, and it doesn't take long to make up that difference.
I think the problem will be there's fewer second-hand cars, fewer second-hand EVs on the market, though.
Yeah,
and people hold on to them a lot longer, I would figure.
Quite possibly, if they paid more for them. But what we really want to do is encourage lots of people to buy their brand new EV, so there is a second-hand market for them.
Yeah.
Free Tech Talk book. Here's your chance to grab a free copy of the latest Tech Talk compilation book in 3 easy steps. Step 1. Listen to any Tech Talk episode. Step 2. Leave a review on your favourite podcast app. Step 3. Email a screenshot of your review to freebook@techtalk.digital with your name and address. The first 20 emails received this week will receive a free book. Don't wait. You are listening to this podcast right now. Leave a review on the app you are listening to this on and send that screenshot to freebook@techtalk.digital. Tech Talk, your gateway to the tech world.
As I get older, the more it seems to me that some are born to create and some are born to destroy. It's just such a pity that when the creative ones channel their talents into ripping people off. Matt, What's the latest from the perilous world of scamology for us to be on the lookout for?
I find this interesting. I'm going to blame it all on the Chasers. Now, for our international audience, go and search the Chasers. It's a group on the ABC TV that does some various comedy. And they had a fake news clip they used to do as a comedy skit called CNN. I don't know how many N's there were. There were a few N's in there. It might have been for CNN. So I think it stood for something like Chaser Non-Stop News Network. So non had two N's. So maybe it was CNN. And they used to do comedy, but they were fake news articles by CNN, and basically having a go at the fact that we've now got a 24-hour news cycle, so you get some ridiculous news that comes through because you don't have the half-hour, 1 hour news slot once a day anymore. You've got to have news feeding 24 hours a day. All very funny, all lighthearted, and again, good fun. But now we've got scammers using deep fake technology, very clever technology, and they're using CNN news articles to blackmail people to pay money for various things. So what they'll do is they'll create a news clip and they'll have me, the subject of the news clip, having committed some terrible crime. Might be a sexual assault, might be distributing explicit content, it might be something, domestic violence issue with my wife, some terrible thing that I would never do. Wow. But they create a CNN news clip with someone that looks just like the CNN newsreader, with all the logos correct, and they send that video to me. And they say, here's a CNN news clip that if we release this to the world, people are going to believe you're beating up your wife, or they're going to believe you've been convicted of sexual assault because this is a CNN news clip. Anyone that sees this is going to believe it's absolutely real. But look, if you just pay us X dollars, then we'll destroy this. Of course, they may or they may not destroy it. They may distribute it anyway, or they might call me again next week and say, well, you paid your $100 last week. We'd like $200 this week.
Its price has gone up.
That's right. And it might keep going up until I finally reach some sort of limit. But this is the problem, because the technology is getting so good to produce these deep fakes, then it's pretty easy for them to have a photo of me. You can get photos pretty easily online of lots of people. You have a photo in the news clip. You create this whole fake article, and there you go. And then it is straight blackmail, but then you're trying to find who it is. And a lot of these are coming out of West Africa. Nigeria is obviously a particular part. And there's one group in particular that it gets worse. They're called Yahoo Boys, and they don't actually do the blackmailing. They create a toolkit. So with this toolkit, they give you the tools to go and create the blackmail video. Here's a script that you should use when you send it to the target that you're actually going to blackmail. Here's how you go through the process and do all this. Here's the coaching, very detailed process coaching you on how to promote it all, and you pay them a certain amount to actually buy or use their tools. So they're not doing the scamming. They're just giving you all the tools to do it and relying on people out there. It's almost a franchise model from the scammers.
Jeepers creepers.
Yeah, so be aware of it. Look, it would be terrible to see a video of yourself being accused of things, or not even accused, being supposedly convicted of things that you haven't done. And you can imagine people seeing that might have gone to school with you or might have been at uni with you, haven't seen you for a decade or more, going, oh, gee, that Matthew, I always knew he was like that. Or just seeing that and just having all these friends, and you can put it out there as much as you like, this was fake, but once they've seen it, they go, oh, gee, I saw that the other day, and you don't always get to see the follow-up one. So,
floating there in the back of their minds.
Yeah, very disappointing, but again, it's this whole concept we've got. We talk about the good in AI, and this is the misuse of AI, and I suppose taking advantage of human trust. We trust when we see something like the CNN News.
Well, here's some news out of social media. There's been a glitch in Meta's processors whereby many users have suddenly found themselves following the new US president, the vice president, and the first lady after the inauguration on January the 20th. It's an interesting turn of events and rattled some Facebook and Insta users. Matt, what's all behind this?
I don't actually know if it's a glitch or if it's a deliberate process by Facebook or by Meta to actually keep some sort of continuity in staying in touch with the White House. So when you go back to Barack Obama, he was the first one who really jumped on social media and said, this is an important tool for me, the president, to communicate with a lot of people. What a great way to get our information out there. And I imagine the attraction for someone like the US president is you can get it out there in the way you want to say it, in the form you want to say it, and make sure you're addressing your concerns. If you're just relying on news outlets, media outlets, sometimes they might just miss an important part or might not report it the way you wanted it reported. So you can control the narrative a little bit better. So fantastic. But then when it came to the end of Barack Obama's 8 years in office, then suddenly Facebook said, well, you've got a White House account there that's got a bunch of users, I don't know, 50 million users or some large number of users or followers, sorry. What are we going to do now? Do we just cut that off and then start again? Or do we have some sort of transition where the account for the White House president or the president of the United States continues on? So the decision was made, I assume in some sort of consultation with the White House, where the account continues on. It changes. It used to say President Barack Obama, and then 2017 came along, it said President Donald Trump, 2021, President Joe Biden, etc. So it's always that. So the Vice President the same, First Lady the same. So you've got these accounts there. But again, suddenly people who may or may not have been Trump fans are getting information in their feeds from Donald Trump. They're going, I didn't follow that. Meta, what are you doing? Are you forcing this onto me? What's happening here?
Right.
Of course, they're saying, no, it's just you used to follow a previous president. Now it's information coming through. Now, some people have sworn black and blue that they didn't follow any president along the way, but it's pretty easy to forget. If you saw something 4 years ago from Joe Biden or maybe 9 years ago from Barack Obama, you go, oh, that's interesting. Oh, yeah, I'll follow that. I'll keep up to date with that. You don't remember everyone you clicked on that you're going to follow, but some people are quite incensed by it. Now, to make it worse, they said, people that didn't particularly like him, damn you, Donald Trump, I'm unfollowing you, I'll show you. And it didn't work because at the beginning of Donald's presidency, there were a huge number of people who were both following and unfollowing Donald Trump. So they were just congested. They just couldn't handle getting all those requests come through.
The amount of traffic.
So what sounds like a great conspiracy theory that Mark Zuckerberg and Donald Trump are doing things together to trick all these people, I think was a fairly innocent process of continuing on a process which makes sense for the president to have an account and just congestion at the very beginning of someone's presidency.
So definitely not a glitch. That's a misnomer. It's just a process.
Well, there was a glitch though, which is, no, I don't know the actual answer to this one, but at one stage when you searched for using the hashtag Democrats, it didn't give you anything. So you couldn't use that hashtag for a time. Now, that was a glitch, that one. And again, I don't know the bottom of that one, and there's been no information coming out of Meta to say that
conspiracy one. Conspiracy theories will swell.
And then you can build the conspiracy theories on that one alone.
Now, I don't know how I feel about this next story. In our Christmas gift ideas episode of 2023, we talked about the return of the Tamagotchi, that classic little digital distractor first hatched in the mid-90s. Now, it's been given a modern makeover, which includes buying into the Star Wars phenomenon. But the latest news is that you can now hatch and grow, insert gasp, your very own Dark Lord of the Sith. That's insert second gasp and the Imperial March music. Matt, grow your own Darth Vader Tamagotchi. Has the world gone mad?
Possibly. I'm fascinated that Tamagotchi is still out there. People are still buying Tamagotchis.
It's got that clunky little LCD screen. Yeah?
Yep, that's right. 1997, they were first released internationally. And I do remember going back to my kids when they were growing up, had Tamagotchis. And, of course, school sensibly said, no more Tamagotchis. Because the kids were constantly going to it because you've got to keep them alive. You've got to feed them, clean up their poo.
It was our insight into what it was going to be like when mobile phones came out.
It was. So school said no more Tamagotchis. But, of course, the kids knew that Tamagotchis would potentially die or be very sick if they were left the whole day.
They had a responsibility to respond to it.
So the kids would leave the 4 Tamagotchis, for each child had 1 Tamagotchi, out on the kitchen bench with strict instructions to my darling wife to make sure she kept the Tamagotchis alive during the day.
All the feeding and the watering the sending to sleep and all that sort of stuff.
All those things. So,
oh, goodness, man.
And I can't believe that we did. I can't believe we didn't just say, sorry, they're going to die, but we kept them alive for them. Maybe it would be too traumatic.
A big rock fell out of the ceiling and landed on them on the kitchen table and destroyed them all.
Well, if I wanted to make sure my kids behaved, it was like, okay, clean up the dishes. Otherwise, I'll take your Tamagotchi off you and it might die. So, but not only Tamagotchis going back, I still find incredible how many things are sold that are Star Wars themed. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry.
It's a phenomenon. It's beyond a phenomenon status.
Unbelievable. So when someone like Tamagotchi approaches Disney and says, we'd like to do something with Star Wars on it, they go, sure thing. And there's just another few dollars or whatever it might be from each particular one. But this one's quite interesting. I do love the concept of it. So you start off with Anakin Skywalker. And it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter how you treat Anakin. It doesn't matter how you go through a process.
He's going to turn up bad.
It's going to turn into Darth Vader. So you think nature versus nurture. This one is definitely just nature.
We can turn him into a Jedi.
What you can do, though, is there are 10 different versions that you can end up with. So the way you look after Anakin means that the Darth Vader you end up with will be potentially different, as 10 different versions there. So it's a little bit of nurture. So what they're basically saying, the nature versus nurture argument, it's mainly nature. He's going to be Darth Vader. And a bit of nurture, slightly different version of Darth Vader. I'm not sure how the different versions look or react, but it's quite fascinating.
So if you mistreat him, I'm just wondering what sort of hell hits the fan then.
What sort of bad version you get of Darth Vader? That's right. So you get some mini games on there. So you've got to do some lightsaber training and some of the learning processes, because you can imagine you need to be pretty good with a lightsaber if you're Darth Vader.
Yeah.
You've got the Death Star trench run you've got to do as one of the mini games on there, a word puzzle on there. So it's quite fascinating. They've got a dozen different low-resolution renditions of famous Star Wars movie scenes. So a Tamagotchi with a movie scene on there. Surely it's going to be pretty hard to watch. But I can see Tamagotchi enthusiasts. I can see Star Wars enthusiasts buying it. I can actually see, and just don't tell my kids this one, but I can see me buying some of these for presents for my kids over their birthdays over this
and
year.
You're going to breed a swarm of Darth Vaders.
Oh, it's great. So, again, it's just one of those things, isn't it? You think everything old is new again. Someone's got to dream up these things.
Yeah.
And sitting around a boardroom, Tamagotchi guys say, let's keep bringing these out. And here we are almost 30 years after the first one, still bringing them out, and it's still the same basic little toy.
Did a bit of research. 1996 is when they came out.
Yeah, that's when they were released, but internationally 97. So
97, right.
Yeah, they first were released in their home country 96, and then they went, oh, this is not too bad. We'll go international in 97. So, yeah, it's quite fascinating. Anyway, they'll be out next month. They're taking pre-orders already.
Goodness me. Now, no surprises, if you're a Mars rover, getting a tyre change is hugely problematic. There are simply not enough local tyre dealerships in Mars, or on Mars, yet. So engineers are forced to come up with strategies to ensure that these rovers can keep on roving regardless of the treacherous terrain. Matt, what's news in the Mars rover wheels?
Well, a very clever school teacher has said to me on a regular basis, material science. The future is material science. And
Glad
this
I made an impact there.
That's right. And this is the future now. At the moment, Mars rovers have steel wheels that are made so they don't get punctures, because, as you said, there's not a little repair shop just around the corner.
It's not, oh dear,
That's right.
is a really bad phrase in the Mars rover observation point.
And the steel wheels are okay in that they kind of perform a role, but they're not ideal. They've got little cleats on them and they can move around on Mars. But one of the things that a tyre does, a normal tyre does, is it lets you go over terrain because it deforms slightly as it goes over that terrain.
What do they call it? Is that terraforming or
Sounds good to me,
No,
terraforming.
that's probably misused, but anyway, let's use it.
That's right, terraforming. There we go. NASA's now come up with a shape memory alloy, SMA for short is what NASA talk about it, and they've used a nickel titanium alloy that retains its shape, but it can also flex. So it can do the job of a tyre, move over rocks and bumps, etc. It can terraform and then
Thank you.
and then returns back to its original shape. And it can do this a lot of times. You could probably build steel to do something similar, but just like steel springs on a car, eventually get the stage where you get sag in your springs, you probably would get the steel getting to the point where it doesn't go back to its original shape after not a long period of time. They want these rovers to be out there for a long time, so they're building this. So they've been doing some testing. They've got a slope simulated lunar operations laboratory is what NASA's got to go and simulate this whole environment. So they've been doing some testing on their slope to go through and say, would this rover work? How would it work? And these tyres, if you call them. I'm not sure if tyres are still the right term. These things outside the rims of the vehicle are basically working exactly as designed. They're deforming when they're going over things. They're going back to the original shape. They're not getting flat because they're open anyway. And I thought, well, maybe they could do solid rubber tyres. I've seen push bikes with solid rubber tyres that don't get punctures, but they're very heavy and they don't deform that well because they're solid rubber, so they're not really deforming. These are deforming. So I think it's great, but what's more exciting for me is that surely we're not too far away from getting these on our push bikes and potentially cars as well, because punches in cars not so common, but I still get punches on my push bike, and that's a hassle. So
frustrating.
NASA, when you get it right, can you just give the technology to some tyre manufacturers in the push bike arena or sell it to them or whatever? And I reckon you could have this whole tyre made from this nickel titanium alloy and then just have a rubber on the contact patch. So you've got grip, so you want that rubber grip still, but you've then got the rest of it lightweight. You haven't got a big bunch of sidewalls or tubes in it and no punches. How cool would that be? So, and then I think you probably have different tyres that deform different amounts to simulate different tyre pressures. So when I'm racing my mountain bike, on some tracks I'll go down 15, 20 PSI in my tyres, whereas I'm going on some more, I suppose, harder tracks, I might go to 30 PSI. So I can have different tyres. This one's the equivalent of a 30 PSI tyre, or this one I want to have a bit more deformation. So surely we could do that just to keep me happy. That's what I want. Forget Mars, just make me happy on my bike.
Matt. It's on its way. You've probably heard by now the big AI surprise out of China, the AI engine called DeepSeek. It caused a meltdown at Wall Street, and Matt, you're not going to tidy up the mess so much as just explain how things are much messier now.
They are much messier now, and I've left this tool last, and again, one of the only minor issues with our podcast is that we're normally recording it a week in advance of when people are listening to it. So DeepSeek is big news at the moment, but by the time people have listened to this or are listening to this, maybe it's not such a big news, but I'll give you the lowdown as it stands.
Well, I had a friend on the day that the news broke. He was posting, DeepSeek, you got to get onto it. It's amazing. Yeah,
so I know my kids are already using it. They're ChatGPT fans. They're going, it looks pretty good. We're trying it out, and it seems pretty good so far. It's a Chinese AI startup, only started in 2023. And the big news was when you use this, it uses a lot less computing power and it's a much cheaper product to train. Now, that was bad for NVIDIA in particular. And if we just go back, say, a few days before the announcement, in the top 5 companies you had in the US on the NASDAQ, top 5 by market capitalization, you had Apple at $3.6 trillion US. NVIDIA was sitting about the same, maybe $3.5, $3.6 trillion as well. Then Microsoft, Amazon and Alphabet. They were the top 5. Alphabet way down at a miserable $2.4 trillion. Now, keep in mind, it wasn't that long ago. It was back in August 2018 that Apple made big news as the first trillion-dollar company on the NASDAQ. So from 2018 to 2025, we've gone from $1 trillion to $3.6 trillion.
Wow.
But on the day the DeepSeek was launched to the world, that was the day NVIDIA lost about $600 trillion off their market capitalisation. So 17% of their share market was wiped. Now, why?
No money for play lunch that day.
No, that's right. Why was so much wiped off it? How could DeepSeek wipe so much of a company that is not an AI company? You've got ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot. They weren't impacted at the same level. But the reason is that DeepSeek was demonstrated, again, easier, cheaper to train, but it's almost blowing apart that whole concept that AI development just requires massive computing power. You want to develop AI further, just throw more power at it. There you go, problem solved. DeepSeek is showing that actually there are other ways to deliver on the promise of AI without needing all that computing power. Now, NVIDIA's share price had gone up based on the fact that all this AI development would need a huge number of chips. Therefore, NVIDIA's share market price kept going up. But hold on, if we don't need so many chips, maybe NVIDIA isn't quite as valuable a company anymore. But it seems incredible, doesn't it? 17% of the value of a company wiped in one day by someone who's not even a competitor coming out with something. One of the things that's interesting with DeepSeek is that the code itself is open source. Developers across the world can inspect it. They can improve upon it, and they can build upon it. So that's something that no other AI tool is doing. Every other AI tool is protecting all their code.
Wow.
DeepSeek saying, here it is. There's still a big question mark in my mind. We talked about TikTok last week and about a US president coming along with an executive order making a huge change in the potential for something like TikTok. Now, TikTok is mainly cats doing silly things. There's a bit more than that, I know, but it's silly videos and things that don't seem that important. And the concern from the US is what impact that might have for a Chinese company being told by the Chinese government, we'll like that data, thanks very much. Surely of much greater value would be an AI tool where you could influence the results coming out of that. Surely that would be a much greater value. So I do wonder whether or not at some stage the American president says, hold on, DeepSeek is now bad, an executive order banning that, doing whatever, and NVIDIA's share price goes back up by 17%. So 17%. One of the things that's interesting is it is controlled by a Chinese company. So if you go and search on something like the political status of Taiwan, you may get a different answer to what you might get out of ChatGPT. If you went and searched on something like what happened in Tiananmen Square, you might get a very interesting answer that may not completely reflect the facts as the rest of the world saw them on that day. So there's still a bit of Chinese influence there, which is why I'm fascinated that nothing's come out of the US government by now. Now, again, when people listen to this, maybe something will have come out by the US government, but this is throwing the world of AI a curveball. And where this goes, we don't know, but it is showing that the landscape is changing pretty quickly, and AI is definitely at its very early stages of development, where we will see another thing like this happening again in 6 months and another thing happening again in 6 months' time after that.
And I just, the news coming out about AI is just, or changing that landscape, as you're saying, so rapidly.
Yeah.
It's frightening.
It is frightening. DeepSeek's already had a cyber attack on it, so there were some outages from DeepSeek. Now, whether they were done by ChatGPT, who knows, but NVIDIA or ChatGPT might have gone and attacked them, but it's a changing landscape, quite incredible changing landscape.
Me. And with that, I'm going to stick a pin in this episode and watch the sucker deflate to zero. That's it for another week for us, folks. Thanks for another cracking tech talk, Matt.
My pleasure. Well, I don't like the talk of pins there because it just made me shudder with my bike tyres again. So I'm just going to go and check my bike tyres to see how they're looking.
Well, I'm off to pick up some blank Blu-ray discs for the nostalgia value. And they may just become a collector's item. And if not, they might make a cool, shiny Frisbee. You've been listening to Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson, and I'm your host, James Eddy. Grateful for your company, whether it be via fibre optics, copper cable, or electromagnetic waves bouncing their way gleefully through the atmosphere. Don't forget to tell your friends about us and bring them along for another week's time, for another cracking episode. Until then, take care and we'll see you